Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski.
Today we're in Florida with an originally Ohio runner, an Ohio schoolboy champ, Ohio State, multiple-time All-American, Big Ten champion and record holder. Some of those records may still exist. Some of them may have been retired. AAU Junior champion at one point on the list. Only name ahead of him was Jim Ryan. He eventually ran a mile faster than the famous 3:51.1 American record that Ryan had set earlier. And today, when we watch races, of course, there's often pacers that start out in lane 8 or 9 and zoom to the front. We called them rabbits back in the day, and our guest today helped Seb Coe set 2 world mile records as a pacer. If his name means only one thing to you, perhaps it's a race in Oslo where he did some famous work as a pacer. So we'll get to all that. Welcome on the podcast today, Tom Byers. Hi, Tom.
Hey, Matthew, thank you very much. What an introduction.
Yeah. Let's tell people your origin story, how you got into competitive sports and running as a kid.
As a kid in middle school, you try out for different sports, and I just wasn't very good with sports that had a ball. So baseball, football, basketball. So I started running in middle school, then went to high school, tried out for the football team. And the coach said, I don't think you're going to make it, but they all made us run a 1.5 mile time trial. And I lapped everybody, and the cross country coach happened to be there. And he goes, Tom, you ought to drop football and take up running. I think, not only can you letter your freshman or your first sophomore year, but I also think that you can get some notoriety at the school and people will know who you are rather than being a bench warmer. So I took up running.
How did you do in cross country? I don't really think about your high school cross country career.
I won the city championships in the city of Columbus, Ohio, and made it to the state. Didn't do that well. Back in cross country days, unlike many of the runners nowadays, we'd run to the park and maybe throw the football and do some sprints and then run back to the school. So we really didn't train much, maybe 20, 25 miles a week. And if you can call it training, but I kept reading things that said, don't burn yourself out as a high schooler if you want to run later on in life, and made sense to me. So I ran cross country. Not very well, but did okay.
You had more success in track in high school, right?
Yes. At one time, I held 11 school records at our high school, which has now been closed since, I think, 1976. But no, I had a lot of success, and it's just, that's what started it. As I was running, some of the college coaches took notice, and right in my local hometown, the coach at Ohio State, he said, we'd like for you to join the team. Some of the guys that I ran against in the city and district meets and the state meets already went to Ohio State, and it felt comfortable. And so it's like, I'll stay home and go to Ohio State.
Now, how did that transition work then? From a high school successful athlete, and did you get a full scholarship?
Yes, got a full scholarship. Okay. What I ended up doing with this full scholarship is we needed to recruit some other individuals. At that time, especially at Ohio State, when the focus is football, we had very limited number of scholarships. So I told the coach, I said, look, I don't need a full ride because I can live at home. And so we gave a partial scholarship to another kid that really needed it, that complemented the team, and we had a stronger team. I'm not going to say because of that, but it was the right thing to do.
What was the coaching like? What was the transition there from 25 miles a week and probably more serious attitude of all the teammates? And what was your training like? Because quickly you had big success in Ohio State, from indoor, outdoor, everything. How did all that go?
Well, what happened is I ran not a great time in high school, 4:18.1 for the mile. Nowadays, I couldn't even walk on a high school team with that kind of time. But we went from about 25 miles a week to, I was training between 120 and 140 miles a week. at college. So, and I had a lot of speed work. I used to run the 4x4, the open 400, even the 200. And I was thinking either I'm going to really get injured and end my career, or I might do some good things. I ended up running between my senior year of 418 and my freshman year. I ran 3:37.5, which equated to a 3:54 mile at the time. And I don't know about records nowadays and don't really care that much about it because that was in the past. But at the time, they said that was the biggest drop in 1 year for a runner to go from 418 to 3:54.
That's unbelievable. Crazy. Wasn't the AAU meet, the juniors?
No, the junior meet, I think it was like 3:40, 3:39, somewhere around there. It was a meet over in Europe where I did not win, but I was pulled around to a very fast time for that time.
Okay. 120, 140 miles a week is maybe normal for the distance run. A lot of teams, my colleges run 110. But for a miler, that is an enormous amount of miles to run.
Yeah, that was the era of the long, slow distance, LSD, with Frank Shorter and all the guys talking about it. So it was just, it felt right. I trained with a lot of the distance runners. And even post-collegiate, when I was running with Athletics West and training with Albert Salazar and the Oregon team and the Athletic West team, we were still running massive miles like that, 120, 140 miles. We would train together all fall and early winter, and then we would start spreading out and splitting up, and they would stay on the strength distance size, and I would go back to the strength French side, speed side.
Right. So there's a few runners that have had quality runners that had a year with a giant improvement. Steve Scott was a very successful runner, but then zoomed up. Dave Waddle, 1 year, maybe freshman to sophomore, his mile time just plummeted. And he said, "Oh, wow, I am on a new level here." Did that happen for you? And when you ran that spectacular 1500, what was your outlook of what was possible for you? And who were you looking at in the papers and on the TV reports and on the running reports to look at, say, oh, maybe I'm going to chase those guys?
I was 19 at the time, probably a little squirrely, as a lot of freshman runners are. And I really didn't think that much about it. Looking back retrospectively, I would say it probably was a little bit too easy because you run a fast time. I ran many fast times that year, multiple times under 3:40. And you're a freshman, you have the school record now, you win the Big Ten, and then it's, oh, I can keep this up and exponentially keep getting better. And it didn't work out that way. And in fact, what I tried to do is come home from Europe because I spent the summer in Europe and actually got to train. And Steve Prefontaine took me on like a big brother for a couple months over there. I came back and it was time for cross country. So I didn't take a break and went immediately into cross country and set in and didn't do as well as I wanted to when I came back.
That's an interesting part of your story, I think. When talking about going to Europe and your relationship with Pre, how did that come about? Who funded that and how did that all work? And who else was there?
I was part of the AAU team. The national governing body of track and field at the time would fund everything. And Free was over there. And you remember, I was this free-spirited guy, had long hair and maybe, I don't know, a little radical at the time. And I think I met my hero, Steve, and I think he was like 23, 24 at the time. I was like, oh my gosh, I just asked my hero. We were out on the track and did some workouts together. And I think he thought I might be a little bit cool. And so we just got to hang out together. And he'd been in Europe many times. He showed me the ropes a little bit. And I'm not saying I learned a lot, but it was just kind of nice when you're able to meet this icon and the person you worship as a runner and be able to fulfill one of your bucket list events.
looking through your career, there aren't too many names that you didn't beat to the finish line one time or another. So it's a great list. And you were competitive. There's a lot of videos of your races available that people can watch. And yeah, you're the guy with the long hair. And almost nobody else was. Nobody else grew it that quite that long. Maybe the spirit was the same and the culture at that time. I wanted to ask you then, looking back from all the way from high school through the end of university, your personal approach about competition, how much was winning and competing? How'd you view that?
The approach was when you're racing, especially in the Big Ten, it was to win. So I won multiple Big Ten championships. So I was always prepared for that. But I think one of the challenges that I actually had throughout my entire career was I just love running. Every morning, I still get up early and go out running because I just love to run. They set freedom, those positive endorphins. It's been like that forever. A lot of times, post collegiate, when I was racing, one of the things that I didn't really appreciate a lot was watching a championship meet and they're running a high school time for the first 3 laps and then they run a 51:52. And that's not what sports enthusiasts come out to watch. They want to see people go from the front. They want to see you gut it out. They want to see a great race. So I always had that in the back of the mind, that very similar to like, Coach, I don't need the full scholarship, even though I needed the money, but I could live at home. It was like people paid to see a race, not people jog for 3.5 laps, and then who's the best sprinter. Maybe it was a little quirk that I had throughout my career.
Yeah, early on, up through university, were there some races where you did strategic running based on who was in the race that changed that? Or are you just, I'm going to run as fast as I can, they're not going to catch me?
No, there were. Even back in high school in the City League championships, there was a guy in the 800 that won the 800 the last couple years. And I really focused in on this guy named Jerry Mounts. It's like, there's no way I'm going to let this guy beat me. And at the finish line, I outleaned him by about an inch. And so it was very strategic on how we approached that race. But at the same time, it's about competition, putting it out there and who's the best on that day.
Let's talk about the shoes and stuff. And when you finally got some real proper running shoes, did that happen in high school? And then with the AAU, what kind of stuff was going on there?
No, in high school, it's whatever my parents could afford and whatever we had, right? So you'd go down to the local running store and buy a pair of shoes and a pair of spikes, and that was it. In college, they gave you a couple pair of shoes and said, here's, these got to last for the whole cross country season, so take care of them. And after my freshman season, during the summer, before I went to Europe, I was approached by a shoe company and they gave me a bunch of shoes and some tracksuits and that. And I thought, oh, this is really nice. I wore those shoes. And ever since after that, I was able to wear shoes that were sponsored by a shoe company. There was no money in the game at the time, but at least it saved me money on having to go out and buy a pair of shoes. And I could always have, at that time, the most advanced technology in the shoes so I could compete on a level playing field with everybody else.
I wanted to ask you, when you were in Europe with Prefontaine, did you guys ever get into discussions of the future and money? He was a big proponent and big player in pushing for getting athletes' ability to take funds. Did that come up in your discussion, or when did that come up for you? Before Athletics West, and how all that happened?
Yeah, that was before Athletics West. Specifically, to answer your question, Pre didn't address that with me. He probably just saw me as some 19-year-old kid that needed a little direction over in Europe on how to travel to track meets and stuff. I think the first time that came up was back, oh geez, this is still pre-Athletics West when I was competing. And Frank Shorter was I'm going to call him the treasurer of the AAU, who says, look, I put together some trust funds and you can put some money in there and then you can pull it out for training expenses, that kind of stuff. But you got to know, I was a pretty good runner, but not one of the great runners. And so I had some money, but not a whole lot that I was able to put into a trust fund. But that's when it first hit me that there could be some funds in track and field. But again, that wasn't why I pursued it, because I just wanted to compete against the best and actually try to win some races.
And before you went west out to the Pacific Northwest, did you take a break from racing? Did you ever take a break from running?
I took a break. I didn't take a break from getting up and running, but I took a break from the running scene because I got married to my wife, Ann, and we just celebrated our 46th wedding anniversary.
Wow.
And even back in the old days in Athletics West in the 80s, she was with me then. We got married in Columbus, and I had to get a real job. I have a family now, wanting to buy a house and all that. So I was an office manager for a farmers co-op called Landmark. I was training in the morning, sometime early, sometimes in the late afternoon or early evening, because I wouldn't get home until 6:30 from the office. So we did that for about, gosh, it was almost 3 years. And then one day I got a call from Athletics West, and he said, hey, we remember when, I was like, uh-oh, where's this going? Can we remember when you were running pretty fast at Ohio State? And we think if you're in a controlled environment with other athletes and not having to worry about working full time, you would be able to maybe try running again. And they gave me 2 weeks to make up my mind. So 2 days before the 2 weeks expired, I told Ann, I said, I had this funny call a couple of weeks ago, and they said, I don't quit my job and come out to Eugene, Oregon and train with the Athletics West team. And she goes, well, how much time we had to make up our minds? So I got to let them know in 2 days. She said, you want to tell them yes, aren't you? And I said, well, I don't know. So it's really, Ann is the one, because even though long hair, I'm conservative by nature, right? And it's like, I got a pretty good job and we'll have our roots there in Columbus. And she goes, Tom, if you don't do it, when you're 40 years old, you're going to ask yourself, I wonder what I could have done. So we sold the house and packed up the U-Haul and moved to Eugene, Oregon.
That's fantastic. I didn't realize, your identity was then not, I'm going to be the top of the elite runners. And they saw it, and that's fantastic. I didn't know Nike had done that with anybody else. Said, let's dig this guy up from a couple years ago. That's fantastic.
In fact, it was Dick Quack, who was the Athletics West, the great runner from New Zealand. And he called, and because after the AAU meet back in 74, the next day we went on a distance run. It was myself and John Walker and Rod Dixon, and we flew. And they were amazed that this miler from Ohio State could keep up on this run and force the pace. And in fact, that was kind of the talk of Europe that year. It was like, this guy stayed right up with these future Olympic champions and stuff, and nobody knows who he is, but he could do it. But life throws some curveballs, and I had many injuries after my freshman year at Ohio State, trying to get back to where you once were. And it's like, I had my time, and now I'm going to go work and approach the corporate world.
How much time did you miss? Did you miss an entire season at OSU?
I missed part of 3 seasons at OSU.
Oh.
Always trying to get back fit so you can run a Big Ten champion or NCAA champion. Probably trying to work out too hard and then taking some shortcuts after an injury so you can get back. And the more you do, the more you do. It's like the harder I trained, the more injured I got.
You have a good self-awareness and a memory of these things. Reading articles from various people, there's a lot of people's different impressions of you, and there's quotes. Some people call you craziest guy. Some people have called you the most physically gifted person they ever trained with. How did things change for you when you met Bowerman and went west?
I think how things changed was the mental approach to what you're doing. My folks, they were never runners. They were both smokers. My dad was a former Marine, and he would always say, always a Marine. And it's time, you got to get this running thing out of your system and go get a real job. So you always have that on one side saying your time and the limited spotlight is over. Now you enter the workforce. I tell people, even today, when they talk about some of my running achievements, and I was inducted into the Ohio State School Athletic Hall of Fame, and I think I still hold the track record 50 years later. And I always say that plus $3 still gets me a Coca-Cola. But guys, thank you for recognizing. I just happened to put one foot in front of the other fairly quick back years ago. But when I moved out to Eugene, Oregon, instead of trying to get this out of your system and be a business person, it was, we're here to help you become the best that you can be. You be your best self. And I got to train with the Athletic West coach, and it went okay, but I met Bill Dellinger and the Oregon guys in Bowerman, and all of a sudden, I found my spot. I found my people. I want to be part of this. And Bill Bowerman made some shoes for me, but Coach Bill Dellinger, he was the best thing that happened to me in my life, except for meeting and marrying my wife, because that's what he was focused on. And he knew exactly what we needed when we needed it, and actually brought the sports imagery and mental toughness to the training, because you're training now with a purpose.
Did it take you any time? How long was the process for you going all in with Coach Dellinger and saying, okay, I'm going to switch the way I think about this, the way I think about training and the purpose and everything? How long did that take?
Well, we moved out, I think it was October of that year, and I was on the European tour running PRs that next summer, so didn't take long.
That's great. Okay, so as I mentioned, you beat to the finish line just about everybody at some point or another in some race. Let's jump to some of your pacemaking and the races with Seb Coe. What goes into someone being a pacemaker for a very well-established, wide in the open, where I'm going for a world record? What is your involvement with those guys at that point in your planning?
Well, did you know a Dave Martin from Georgia State University?
The name, I don't know him, yeah.
Physiologist, PhD. He had a lab, and that was back in the early mid-70s, where people like Nick Rose and myself and others would go down to his lab, and we're like human guinea pigs, max VO2, muscle biopsies, all that kind of stuff. Unbeknownst to a lot of people, he worked with Dwight Stones in the high jump. He also worked with Sebastian and Peter Coe. What happened is, when Seb Coe was looking for a pace setter to help him through the first 1,000 meters of the race, his dad, Peter, and Sebastian were speaking with Dave Martin, and Dave got a hold of me, and I don't know if he talked to me first and said, hey, there's this guy who has really good efficiency, and I think he would be a good pace setter for him. So when we're over in Europe, I got to meet Sebastian, and we said, hey, this could be kind of cool. I go to altitude and train with him for, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks. And he was running behind me, getting the feel and being comfortable. And here I am. I remember when I was a corporate risk manager sitting on a couch watching all of these guys run these records. And now I'm going to be on the track with the same Seb Coe, helping him achieve the world. And it was something couldn't turn down.
Well, it's interesting over time, the way pacers work. For a while, I think they were illegal. And then when you were doing it, you started in lane 1. And one time you got caught a little bit, got boxed, and had to really zoom out. Now pacers are labeled pacer.
Yeah.
But you were just with your number, and you were in the race, and it was known what you were doing.
And you had to finish the race back then. So even if you jogged through a 4:10 or 4:12 after you set the pace, it was, I don't know if it was illegal to drop out, but it was frowned upon. So you finished the race.
I talked with Ruth Wysocki. She did pacemaking where she was invited and compensated. Were you compensated besides travel and appearance to do the pacemaking for those kind of races?
I don't believe so. I can't really remember, but I don't believe so for Sebastian Coe. That was more out of admiration and wanting to help somebody who seemed like a good steward of track and field. In Oslo, at that one, I was compensated. So when I won that race.
Well, let's talk about that because maybe it's one of those things where it happened and that's probably the first thing people want to talk to you about. But I do want to talk about because it's just great. I'll put the link up to the race so people can watch it. And the announcing of the race is fun to watch. And I'll just say the one story I heard is Steve Ovett said they were calling out your splits to him. So he thought he was on a good pace. And he said, he's not going to keep that up if I'm running these splits. And that's what he claimed. But let's hear, what was that race like for you? And when did things change from being a pace setter to what happened?
Okay, to set the stage a little bit, before the race, the meet promoter contacted Pete Peterson because he helped a lot of the Athletic West team members and stuff. And he said, I just came off the championships and had a little bit of an injury, but was training well. And he goes, sure, I'm gonna do it. And after he talked to me, I said, sure, Pete, that's fine. I'd love to. The day before the race, they have this little function and you go up and you have strawberries and cream at the meat promoter's house. And it was awesome. You get to see everybody there, other meat promoters, of course, the athletes and stuff. I went up to the meat promoter. He goes, hey, I'm glad you're going to be pacing Steve Ovett for his world record attempt. And it's, yeah, I'm flattered to be asked. I said, one thing, I'm not dropping out. And he goes, laughed and said, oh, sure, we wouldn't expect you to. That's fine. Because, I was pretty fit at that time, probably the fittest I've been, but nobody else knew that. At the end of the day, they could have blown me away if they ran a 3:32 because I couldn't run that fast. So that's how it all started. We start the race and I go out to the lead like I was supposed to. And I set the pace just like I was supposed to. And that's what I've always heard is that the rest of the group, Steve Ovett and everybody else, thought that my splits were their splits and they thought I was running this insane pace. But where it really doesn't make a lot of sense to me is for as many races and repeats that all these world-class runners do, the difference between 55 and 60. I still know that difference today when I'm out running. You get caught up in things, and I think that's fine if that's what happened. They let me get away, and I was running the pace I was asked to run.
Looking at the video, there's a lot of camera work. You can see things. Do you remember when did you start looking over your shoulder and thinking, what is going on? How far? It was 40 yards, 70 yards. Eventually 9 seconds.
Yeah, you always glance over a little bit, but I was more focused on you got to hit 55 point. And so it's like I was more focused on that. But then when I got to the 1,000-meter point, I'm looking at, wait a minute, where is everybody? And I glance like this, I couldn't see anybody. So then you come around the rest of the lap and you have one lap to go. I heard the crowd and everybody. And I think at that time, I actually had 8 or 9 seconds on the field. And that's when I started thinking, I might be able to win this thing. But then with 200 meters to go, the bear jumps on your back and the legs get heavy and it's, oh no, here it goes. But then with 100 meters to go, I could feel everybody coming on. You know how you just get that second breath and you dig down and say, look, I've tried too hard. All the training I've done, I can muster out 100 meters. It's like the horse knowing the barn, right? I started sprinting again because it's like, nobody's going to take this away from me today. Maybe tomorrow, but not today.
Yeah. And that was interesting. The announcer on the very available video, maybe the official broadcast of it, he said, Byers is going to win this and he deserves it. How'd the other runners feel? What was the discussion after the race?
The first was, a shock and disbelief. And then second of all, yeah, you hear the talk is, oh, we were giving his splits. Then they make, and I'm not necessarily not excuses, but it's, we were giving his splits. And then there's this guy, I think over in Europe, who did a documentary about me that I didn't know about. And they interviewed Steve Obed, and he goes, oh yeah, this Byers guy goes, yeah, I was sick that day and I was this and I was that. And at the end of the day, you ran the wrong splits. I understand that. You could have been sick, which is also fine. But at the end of the day, just for many people in the world, and even to myself, it was a fluke. Rabbits don't win races. It happened this one time. So,
Yeah.
and it was a memorable point for me in my life. And in fact, it actually helped me post athletics because a lot of people saw that race. So even in my work career, people would always say, remember seeing that race of you in Oslo, the Dream Mile. So it brought a lot of notoriety, which was a good thing.
And then in New York,
Yep.
the street mile that you won, the funny articles were, is it not only the Byers, he's not that fast. Somebody won the street mile too. It affected how people looked at you because of you doing a pacemaking job though, right?
Yeah, it was a Fifth Avenue Mile in New York. I wasn't the rabbit in the race. It's just I had, unfortunately, and the positive was I got a lot of really good experiences, met some really great people. And of course, I understand it's what can you do for us, Tom? And that's fine. That's fine. The good was I got to run some fast times and meet some really great people and really enjoy life. The bad was you got this label on you, and it was hard to shake that label after I only paced set of 3 races in my life, and all 3 set world records. So it's guys to rabbit. But in the Fifth Avenue Mile, I was competing against everybody. Sydney Marie won it the first year. I won it the second year. But even when I won that race, there were some of the bigger name runners that, oh, I stepped in a pothole, or I did this, or I did that, because there's no way Byers should have beat me. And it's just, I showed up on that day, and it was the best version of myself that I could be that day, and I just happened to win.
That's great. I guess this is personal. We can talk about it or not. But some of the people you mentioned have recently passed on. I think Peterson, Dellinger. And what do you think about those guys? Those in particular, you mentioned them, how important they were to you personally, but the whole running world's reeling from recent passing of these legendary guys.
Yeah, from my perspective, and we all look through a different lens, Matthew. And just like my uncle, who was born in the 20s and fought in the wars, World War I, World War II. And it was like, these guys, they were military. They grew up in the greatest period. They're called the greatest generation of all time. I think I was very fortunate in life because when you talk about the Pete Petersons and the Bill Dellingers, that's when there were people that were in the sport for the love of sport. And I know money is important. I've worked a whole life, so you have to work to have funds to live with. But I think they were from the greatest generation of track and field. The old mainstays that came out of the 50s and 60s for the love of the sport, wanting to develop people to the best of their abilities. And it's just through the passage of time, and now with their passing, yes, it's a natural progression of life, but I think it leaves a significant void because I thought they were the pillars of the track and field community and helping it build it to where it is today.
Yeah, I certainly agree as a fan. And that's why I labeled this podcast and targeted people that came into the 70s or exited the 70s through the 70s. I agree with you. There is that shared thing of anybody who competed then, looking at that whole world of wonder and awe and respect for a lot of people in these different roles. And the boom of running clubs that supported the development of the sport. There's so much stuff going on there. What about your professional career? What did you study at Ohio State? And how do you think being a runner affected you as a businessman?
At Ohio State, I studied marketing and economics because I come from the school that I don't care how much you know about the economy and finance. If you can't market it and market yourself, contrary to what a lot of people said in the track world about me, maybe being immature, or I think somebody said crazy in a book or something like that. But actually took school fairly seriously. So I had a good educational background. Then I went into competition, and it taught you to focus in the here and the now, in the moment, and being able really to have the discipline that's necessary to achieve excellence at a certain degree. So when I went into the business world, not only do you take your academics along with you, but you take that same determination, that grit, that desire, that commitment, and you apply that into your business world. I've had a wonderful career. And in fact, we just moved to Florida. We own a home down here, but we just moved here this year full time. Prior to that, my wife and I moved from Dublin, Ohio to New York City. I went to New York City, found private equity to back a company, and I was the founder and CEO of a whiteboard startup health system where we grew to 13 different health facilities that we treated 1.5 million patients. We were the number one ranked entity in all of New York City, grew it to 30 million. Also, I was able to do all of this with being mission-based to help those who are underserved communities, primarily in federally designated primary care shortage areas, and got to really live the American dream of starting and running a company and serving those who were less fortunate than us. It was the ride of a lifetime, and that ended in December. So now I'm sitting in my office here in Lauderdale by the Sea, Florida, and I started a new company. I'm getting it off the ground now. It's always that push for excellence. If you're going to do it, do it. If you make a commitment, keep your commitment. And this is what I do. But athletics played a big part in that. Having mentors both as some of the individuals we spoke about, the coaches, the Pete Petersons of the world, who looked at the world through a different lens than we do, and then having outstanding mentors in business, it allowed us to become this holistic person that you're speaking with today.
Yeah, that's great. On behalf of mankind, thanks for everything you've done. That's fantastic. I worked in development a lot overseas, just as a consultant and a kind of a data and technology guy. And certainly in my roles, I'd get thrown in and say, I really don't know anything about what you do. So there was a learning curve to know what the subject matter was. Why healthcare, and how hard was that to get into that industry?
I think why healthcare is I'd spent many years in occupational health. I've had family members that have had healthcare struggles. In fact, my sister has not been in the best health for the last few years. And you almost get your calling through the experiences that you have. And so it felt right. It felt right. A lot of the healthcare state in the country, people say we're going to be disruptive in this, but we read in the papers every day about some issues with the large guys and stuff. So I thought that if I could start a small network of urgent care centers and really focus hyper local on community by community that needed healthcare, where their primary health was delivered by busy emergency rooms, that again, that can make the most significant impact. Because I've been blessed to date, I think I'm knock on wood, with good health. And if you do not have great health, your quality of life isn't what it nearly can be. So what the goal was, taking this mission and helping improve the quality of care in these neighborhoods to lift them up so they can have better care. Because if you're feeling better, then you can get jobs and other things, relationships go better in that. And going back to that initial philosophy when I was a squirrely kid, when I was 18, saying you can give part of my scholarship away, it was the right thing to do.
Well, it doesn't take long talking to you, Tom, to understand and find out you're genuine, benevolent, somewhat humble, confident, and all these things. I'm not just trying to butter you up. It really is a pleasure to talk with you. And you have all these accomplishments. You put them in perspective of what they were and how important they were to you. What about trophy room? Do you have or look at the old stuff?
It's funny you say that. When I won the Oslo Mile, the Dream Mile, Steve Ovett had ordered the trophy that he wanted. So it's sitting in a sideboard in our dining room, a little case like this, but you can see it there, which can be every once in a while a conversation piece. And then in our den family room, we have a couple of pieces. One of the really cool things, there was an artist by the name of Ray Parmenter. And in '84, I was chosen as the model for the metric mile. So they did a bronze of me. I was out on the track running, and they would take a lot of pictures and stuff. And then as being the model for that, they made 25 of the bronze statues, and they gave one to me for modeling that. And so that's sitting in a case in our den. So every once in a while, I can look at it and walk by and say, oh, I used to be Tom Byers.
That's a legacy, and after we're all long gone, that piece of metal will probably still be around on the earth. So, good for you.
My son will be able to look at me, and it'll probably haunt him a little bit, but also he'll say, that was cool.
Yeah. I know you're a busy guy with your new venture. Thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure, really a pleasure getting to know you a little bit, Tom, and thank you very much for your time today.
Okay, I really appreciate it. Thank you much.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed another episode. Do you have someone you'd like to hear interviewed on the podcast? You can leave a comment on the YouTube channel or on the website, running70s.com. That's running70s.com. Let me know what you think of the episodes and anyone, including yourself, you'd like to hear interviewed. I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.